Hello, friend. This is Ryan Hicks of TaughtToProfit.com, and today I will talk to you about how shrinking back is sin. Now, what I mean by this is any kind of shrinking back where you're trying to scale down, and I'm not talking about if something has ran its course or whatever, but where you're acting in fear. Many people do this in the minimalist movement. They want to shrink back and have something smaller. They talk about scaling down, and I don't need all this stuff. And that could be perfectly fine, but for many people, it's about lack. It's about limitation, not abundance. Not them freely doing what they desire to do, but them shrinking back and not having what they really want, having less because they're afraid that there's not enough. But God, everything in His creation is expansive and seeks expansion. That's why Jesus said He came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. Expansion of life, not decreasing, not shrinking back. That's why poverty is a sin. Now, poor people will get mad about that statement and say, "Whoa, but you're saying I'm a sinner. I can't do this. I'm sick," or this, and they have all these excuses. But it's not about that. Take yourself out. If you're poor, take yourself out of that perception of being in poverty and really look at it. It is the worst possible thing that could happen to humans. It destroys them. When they're sick, they can't get the proper health care. They don't have, if we talk about real poverty, not just Western poverty standards, but it means you don't even have food at all. You don't have water. You don't have the basic essentials to survive. That's evil. I'm not saying that the poor people themselves are evil. They may be. They may have done things wrong. They may have not done things they should have done. Oftentimes it is higher up above them, where it's leadership and people in power who have enacted these policies that caused the poverty, which is sin. Poverty is always missing the mark. It's always transgression of the law. It's always going against what God wants for you. You look in the Old Testament, poverty and lack and all these things were results of sin. They were results of disobedience. They weren't rewards for righteousness, and they weren't to teach you any lessons. They were judgments on you for wrongdoing. Now, my point in saying that is to encourage you to think expansively. God wants to freely give you all things. One of His purposes in restoring the earth eventually, after all things are subdued, that He is all in all. That's what 1 Corinthians 15:28 says. This is God in whom we live and have our being. This is the Almighty. There's no limitation, no lack, no want in Him. Don't shrink back. Don't get into fear. Fear causes you to shrink back because you think there's not going to be enough. Maybe if it's all relying on you, that's true, but it's not all relying on you. God is faithful, and He's more than enough. Everything. Look up in the stars. There's millions of stars, and those are nothing in the overall scheme of things of God's creation. All in all. He is all. Through all and in all. My friend, you can have an abundance because it's not dependent upon you. Yes, you will have to take action. You will cooperate with God's abundance as your source and supplier, but He'll also be the supply. He will provide you everything you need. You do not have to be in lack. You do not have to be in want, and you certainly never need to shrink back. Shrinking back, consolidating, doing these things that aren't required, but they're only because you're doing it in fear. Because maybe sometimes there may be obvious things where a product line has run its course or a business has, or whatever the case may be. I'm not talking about those things. You know when you're shrinking back because of fear, or when you're scaling something down because that's the natural course of that business. But I'd also remind you, just because something is the natural course of things, maybe there's a supernatural course for you. Maybe you don't have to shrink back. Maybe that's just everybody following a certain pattern that you don't have to follow because there's an abundance in your God. So my friend, today I want to encourage you, don't shrink back. And I want you to go throughout your day thinking, and when you're doing something, Are you doing it from a perspective of abundance, fullness of life, life more abundantly? Or are you doing it out of fear, out of shrinking back, out of lack? If you're looking to buy a product, are you considering, well, I don't know, the price? And I'm not telling you to waste money, but my point is that make sure you're not doing things out of shrinking back into fear because you don't believe there's enough. You don't believe there's an abundance. You don't believe God's going to provide. Before I leave you, I want to remind you, get my book, 600 Wealth, Prosperity, and Abundance Affirmations, because it goes into changing your mindset about wealth and abundance, the opulence of God. That book will help you greatly in expanding and looking for expansion, not for drawing back, not shrinking, not fear, but going out in full faith, a faith-filled life, believing that the mighty God will provide for you. My friend, I pray this is a blessing for you. May God bless you richly.